No, it's not. So I want to welcome everyone who has joined us so far. I'm Sue Etkine from EastmanCARES, the Education Committee. And I also actually have today another member of the committee who is on that you can see, and that's Carol Wood here. And the committee has set up these EastmanCARES Lunch and Learns. There's a couple things that I always do before we start. So forgive me if you've heard this a million times already, but I do want to tell everyone that we do have a very important resource guide available to everyone. And the resource guide is just that. It has all kinds of resources. If you're new here, if you're not new here, it's available on the website. It's also available down at South Cove if you want a hard copy of it. So we do encourage that. We also have something called eCares Connections, which is a way for people who feel the need to reach out and talk to someone. It could be, you could be living alone, you might be living alone, and you just need to talk to someone, whether it's weekly, whether it's monthly, whatever it is. We have some volunteers who are available for you to be able to do that. So that is the eCares connection. You can reach out to us for anything, actually, at EastmanCARES at eastmanh.org. And so we encourage people to do that as well. As I said about this particular webinar, if you didn't hear me earlier, this webinar is set up so that you will not see each other. We won't see the participants. That means we won't see the participants either. You will see the panelists and the presentation, of course. And we do, though, encourage your participation through questions and answers. And at the bottom of most screens, but on where all of your various titles are, you should see a Q&A. We would encourage you to use the Q&A at any point. Actually, type in your question during the talk. My husband Paul is going to be monitoring questions. And at the end, he will work with Marion and Dan in terms of getting those questions asked and responded to. So we would encourage you to do that. There's also the chat. It's easier for us if you just use one thing. And so we are encouraging you to use the question and answers. This is being recorded. It will be available on the Eastman website as a YouTube video. And actually all the presentations are on there as well. So if you know someone who misses this and would like to still hear it, it is still going to be available. We do encourage, when we used to be able to meet in person, which I hope we're going to be able to do again soon, we used to actually have a formal evaluation, and obviously we can't do that in this respect. But we would like really to have any comments about any of these presentations. Again, EastmanCARES at eastmanh.org, or any suggestions for future talks or any comments at all. We would encourage those. Our next speaker is also a member of our committee, actually, and who you've heard before, also on, I should say, the COVID task force, and that's Dr. Ken Dolkart. He is going to be speaking in on April 8th. And the title of his talk is Drug Prices in the U.S., the Grand Bargain. He's quite excited actually to be able to give this talk, and we're really looking forward to hearing from him. So again, that will be on April 8th, and we will be sending out links for that. For this talk, I'm actually now going to turn this over to Carol, my colleague, to introduce today's speakers. And thank you all for coming. And I will now be blocking myself out and turning it over to Carol.
Thank you. It is my great pleasure to introduce Charlie and Marion and Dan Hafner. Actually, we have Dan and Marion in front of us. I know these three individuals personally, and they are extremely professional and deeply caring, which makes them very effective in the work that they do. Marion is a native New Hampshire and daughter of Walton and Virginia Chadwick of New London. She also has the distinction of being a third generation in her Chadwick funeral service. So she's a third generation, and she earned her New Hampshire funeral director license in 1982. Her husband, Charlie, grew up in Vermont, and he met Marion in 1979. They were married in 1982, and at that point, he left his job as a forester to enter the funeral service work. And he went back to school in 1988 and received his license as a funeral director in 1989. So Charlie and Marion purchased Chadwick's funeral service, which is in New London, from her parents in 1991. In 2009, the Hafners purchased Newton Bartlett Funeral Home in Newport. And in 2012, they built Sugar River Crematory, also in Newport. So Charlie and Marion have two sons. Dan is one, and he's with us today. And they joined the business about 9 years ago. And so they're kept very busy with two funeral homes and the crematory. Charlie has been active in New Hampshire Funeral Directors Association for a number of years. And the Hafners, as a family, are very involved in the community. And I know Dan is particularly active with Osborne Sargent Land Preservation. We thank you for that. Dan graduated from St. Michael's College in Vermont and then earned his funeral his director's license. He was employed by the Reddy Funeral Home in Burlington, Vermont, and then moved back home to help out with the family business. So Dan married his high school sweetheart, Megan McLean, from Bradford, New Hampshire in 2015. They have two children, and we have to announce they're expecting their third any minute, even maybe during this talk. So we'll hope we get through it before the call.
Yes, we'll hope. Thank you.
We wish you good luck, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Carol. That was a nice introduction. Appreciate it. You really did very well in covering things. As Carol said, I am third generation here at Chadwick Funeral Service, and Dan and Scott are fourth generation, and Dan's a native of New London also. And we're so happy to be invited today. We appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation, and nice to see the list of folks who have joined us. A couple of familiar names for us. Thank you very much. And we did indeed buy Newton Bartlett in Newport in 2009. At that point, the boys were kind of trying to decide what they were going to do, and they decided they were going to come back and work with us. So we took it on, and we're busy most of the time, going back and forth. Dan really pretty much runs Newport, and we'd like to get him to come back here to New London and run things here, and hire someone who we hope is in the plans, maybe to do more running in Newport. Our son Scott is the crematory operator, and he does other work for us also, runs around, plows, and various other jobs. He does not have his license. Dan does. So we work together, and they both have very kind and nice wives, which is very important. It's not your typical 9-to-5 day by any means. And right now, everybody seems to be very understanding of that. You go out in the night, or, you have a very odd day for work, for timing. However, that's the way it goes. And the crematory we built in 2012, it's over on Reed's Mill Road in Newport. And we have a large percentage of people who like to be cremated. So we're running that on a pretty regular basis also. So let's see.
So I think I'm going to go ahead and try and start our presentation here. So just bear with me for 1 second while I get our slideshow up.
And as Carol or Sue, I guess, said, feel free to ask questions anytime, and we will address them as we go along, because that's what it's really about, is we want to answer what you want to hear, not what, just having us chit chat about things. But I'm so glad Dan is here, because I'm not really familiar with all this. So hallelujah. So there we are.
So there we are. So our talk today is going to start off with or it's titled Pre-Planning, How to Be Prepared When a Death Occurs. And like Mom said, we'll be happy to answer questions, as we go, or if you want to give us a few minutes to talk, and then we can answer some questions. So like we said, we run the Chadwick Funeral Home here in New London and the Newton Bartlett Funeral Home over in Newport. And we have our crematory in Newport as well.
So Chadwick Funeral Home was owned by my father and mother before us, and then by his uncle before him. So we've been in business for well over 100 years here. And Newton Bartlett has also been in business for over 100 years. I happen to know Mr. Bartlett, Junior Bartlett, who owned it for quite a long time, and he owned it with a man named Newton, Dixie Newton. And then Junior Bartlett sold it to his brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law actually sold it to us. He got tired of it and said, don't we want to buy it? And we did. So, and of course, Sugar River Crematory is pretty darn new. Really, I think it was kind of a good move because people like to stay with us through the whole process if cremation is the choice. So here we are. There's our family, our
Here we
little
are.
family, but we have one little addition. So, I mean, before Dan's, Scott and Chelsea on my right, their little boy is the one in the little red car with the black and red shirt. Yep. And they just had a baby 6 weeks ago. So they have a little boy named Oscar as well as little SJ. And the two other kids in their red sweaters are Dan and Megan's, Walton and Althea, both family names. So there we are. Chelsea, the one in the green sweater, thought it would be nice if we had a little personal picture because she thought people like to see something other than just business all the time. So
There we are.
we included it.
So some of the things that we offer at our two funeral homes, we do a lot of pre-planning with people, which we'll go over more, but which means you come in and you take care of things ahead of time before a death occurs. We've talked about how we have cremation often. We still have what you think of as traditional funerals, where people are in their casket, they have a funeral somewhere or a viewing. We go to a church or a cemetery. And so we do all kinds of services. We do lots of celebrations of life where you might go, you might have a funeral of some sort or some sort of calling hour, and then you'd have a get together or a party or whatever you want to call it at some sort of venue. Green burials, which we can talk about more about, or green funeral services. Those are kind of the new thing in funeral services nowadays, and that's starting to become a big thing as well. And then just some other stuff that we offer. We offer keepsakes, which are little mini urns that you can put ashes in. There's jewelry that you can put ashes in. We help people with obituaries. We obviously offer caskets and urns. We help coordinate veteran services. We do a yearly service of remembrance every year around Christmas time for all the people that have died in the past year. We try to remember those people. And yes, we offer all sorts of things.
So, and Dan, as Dan said, we get together and go over things with you. And that's how I prefer to do it. I really like to see you in person. However, this past couple of years has really thrown a monkey wrench into that. So we have been doing more and more. People will call and they'll say, could you send me questions that you'll need and that I can fill out? So I don't have to come in. And so we do that a lot. And we also send a template, if you'd like a template to write your own obituary or help you get started on that. So we do that a great deal now. And some people feel okay about coming in now, or at least finishing up in person. And some people still don't feel good about that, or just they seem to want to just do it all through email, which it's fine. It's just, it's nice to kind of get to know each other, in my opinion, a little bit, but that's just what some people don't want to do. So, so we try to go with whatever it is you'd like.
Before COVID, we probably Zoomed or live stream maybe a single service in our lives, and then Facebook Live and Zooming funerals and calling hours has become a major part of what we do every day. So we Zoom a lot of funerals nowadays, both here at the funeral home and at churches or wherever, and at cemeteries. So that's become a major thing for us. So we've had to quickly adapt to what we do. Do I go over pre-plan?
Sure. So if you would like to do anything with pre-planning, don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email. And it's really pretty easy, at least to get started. And then, if we sat down and talked with you, probably to go over everything and get it all done would be an hour and a half or so. But this way you can kind of do it and see what we ask ahead of time. And it kind of gives you a heads up.
So as you can all see, we've got a slide here titled "The Benefits of Pre-Planning." So pre-planning, we think of when you come in, you meet with us, or like Mom said, we do it over the phone or email. You give us an idea of what your wishes are. And that can be as simple as you say, oh, I think I'd like to be cremated at the time, or I think I'd like a burial. You could tell us what cemetery you're going to go to. You could tell us if you want to have a church service or a service at the funeral home. We could get it more detailed. You could give us all the information that we'd need for a death certificate. You could give us all the information that we need for an obituary. We help people write obituaries all the time. You could give us a list of your family members, so we have that on file. There's a bunch of biographical information that we need for the death certificate, and we could also use for the obit, like your parents' names, your military service, your occupation, things like that. And then oftentimes we'll do up a draft obituary for it, send it to you. And so you can get all your details pretty much worked out beforehand if that is something that you are interested in doing. And one of the reasons we recommend, and we think most people like to get their funeral pre-planned, is it reduces the burden on the family when the time does come. It's nice for the family if you've got something in place, at least a general idea, so that they don't have to make a bunch of sometimes difficult decisions at a stressful time.
It really does help even if you don't tell us anything else, it does help to get those questions down for a death certificate, because like your birth date, your birthplace, your social security number, your parents' names, it is amazing. We rip that off, but there are a lot of kids out there who don't know what Grammy's maiden name was, and they certainly can't remember how to find your social security number. And so it's just a whole lot easier if you just at least give us those items to put on file. So if you don't want to do a whole obituary ahead of time, that's okay, but at least give us the basics. Then also that's a help if you should travel or be on the road somewhere and something does happen, presumably either your spouse or your child or whoever happens to find out, all they'd have to do is call us and then we would help either get you home from wherever you are or have you cremated wherever you are. It just helps the process along a little bit. And that can be very unnerving for a family member to have something happen very suddenly and not know what to do. So at least if you know enough to call one of our funeral homes, we can take it from there.
That's good to know.
And we put on here that it supports the grieving process. And we think that, especially when something unexpected occurs, people don't always want to spend all their time trying to plan the funeral, figure out all the little details. You want to take your time. You want to grieve with your family. You want to remember the person that's passed. And it helps if you're able to have some of your plans in place so that your family doesn't have to think about and worry about if they were doing the right thing, if they were doing what you would have wanted, if they are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. It helps to have something in place beforehand.
I think it's nice. Some people are very thorough. They give us the hymns, the Bible verses, or the readings, or the songs, or whatever it is they want. I do think that's nice, but I also think it's nice to leave a couple of things for the family to do, because it's almost like, okay, mom and dad pre-planned all this, and we don't, it feels odd not to do anything. So maybe you could even leave a list of choices, you know, like 6 or 8 hymns, and let them pick a couple, or readings, or whatever it is happens to be, you know, let them make a couple of decisions. And also, I'm a big believer, and not everybody agrees with me on this, is to be flexible. So if you say, you know, you want to do such and such, and that's the way it's going to be. If you haven't talked about it with your family, or even if you have, and they don't necessarily agree with that, and that's not something that makes them feel very good, you know, leave them a little wiggle room, because if they have to carry out a wish of yours that is just going to drive them nuts for the rest of their lives, is that worth it? I'm not sure it really is. You know, you won't care. You'll be gone. And so, you know, within reason, let them mold that a little bit according to what will work for them. But of course, the best thing to do is to communicate with the family before anything takes place. Talk to them about it, say that this is what you've decided, and ask them if that seems to be okay with them. And then you could say to them, you know, I can be flexible on this. If you have something that you want to do or don't want to do at the time, that will be okay. And not, this isn't probably pertaining to any of you, but I just saw somebody yesterday, and they said that their child was very upset because they were doing this. And I said, no, shame on them, because you want to do this, and then you don't have to dwell on it, but do it and then let it go. We need to face we need to be able to face it, and we need to make sure our kids can face it too.
And I did see that question there, and we'll get to that in just one second. That's our next slide. So I'll just finish up on this one, and then we can we'll go on to that. So I'll show you a couple of pictures that we have here. So in the top picture here, these are urns. So what your cremated remains actually could go into. And nowadays we use urn kind of loosely, but it can be any sort of thing. So like we've got a New Hampshire urn that's made out of pottery. This is a Boston Red Sox urn. So we've got the Red Sox on the front, and there's a baseball right up in the top that you can actually sign with the person's signature. We've got various kinds of wooden urns. This urn right here in the top left there, that urn you plant in the ground, and then you plant a tree sapling on top of it, and your cremated remains, they actually grow or they're placed right underneath the sapling, so they turn into the tree. It's called the Living Tree Memorial Urn. On the bottom left there's some scattering tubes. So you put the cremated remains into the tubes. And then if you want to go scatter them on your favorite mountain or on your walk or whatever, you can open the scattering tube up and shake a few cremated remains out everywhere. And then in the picture below, that's our casket room over in Newport. So we've got all kinds of different caskets, kind of what you think of as traditional wooden caskets. There's metal caskets. There's what you call green caskets nowadays, which don't have any finish on them. They're made out of natural woods. There can be no metal inside if that's what you like. No kind of chemical goes into it. So that's the caskets room. And then our last point here about one of the benefits of pre-planning is if you prepay your funeral, you lock in today's prices for any of your funeral expenses. And then the interest that you earn on that money goes to offset any future price increases. So if you pay us or prepay for a funeral, you're able to lock in all your prices except for what we call cash advanced items, which are expenses that the funeral home doesn't have any control over, like obituaries. People are constantly surprised by how much an obituary can cost nowadays. Like your typical obituary in the Valley News, for instance, probably costs a couple $100 at least. And then if you get into any of the bigger papers, it goes on up from there. Yeah. So yeah, but anyway, so pre-planning can be fairly simple if you'd like it to be, or it can be pretty detailed if you would like to get right down into the nitty gritty. And I will go to our next slide.
I didn't see the question.
I think someone dies at home when you call from home. So this is what happens when a death does occur. You want to talk for a minute?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So if a person dies at either a hospital or other care facility, then you don't need to call 911. Obviously, the hospital or the care facility has their procedures in place, and they'll do what they need to do from a medical standpoint. They can do everything that has to happen. They call it pronounce the death. They can get a death certificate signed with the cause of death, and then they could make a call to a funeral home of your choosing if you'd like them to. If the person is at home on hospice, which means they're under a nurse's care or at their house, then you also don't need to call 911. The hospice nurse will come to your house when the person passes away. They'll pronounce the death, make sure the person has actually died. They'll do some post-mortem care, and then they can call the funeral home if that's what your wishes are. If there's any kind of an untimely death, like if I were to drop dead here in the office, or if you were to be a car crash, or even just a death at home where the person's not under any kind of medical care, then your first call should be to 911. The police will show up. They'll probably send an ambulance, and then they've got their procedures in place on who they're supposed to call, and they'll call everyone they have to.
Yeah, and also if, like for instance, if you should die in the night, if you should go to bed, not wake up in the next morning, and the person who's there with you, if there is anybody, knows pretty much that you have died, you still have to call the local police, and they come, and if it's very clear that you have died and there's no chance to bring you back, then they make their calls. They'll call the medical examiner, and they'll call the attorney general, whoever the calls that they have to make. And they might call your doctor also. They'll look at your pills, just because those are things that they have to do. And then after everybody says okay to it, we get the call, and then we'll come wherever you happen to be. So we get calls, of course, everywhere, in the hospitals, in hospice facilities, in your home, in the woods, on the street, wherever the death occurs, that's where we end up going.
Yeah, and I saw in the question there, New Hampshire doesn't have what we think of as a coroner. We have medical examiners that are employed by the state, and they come to any kind of untimely death where they're concerned about any kind of foul play or drugs or anything like that. They'll actually come to the scene where the person has died. They'll do their investigation, and then they're able to call the funeral home after that. And then whoever is there at the scene is able to call a funeral home. And like we said, we go to wherever they are. We bring our stretcher and our equipment, and we take the family member that's passed away into our care, and then you're able to proceed with your funeral arrangements from there.
And as you can see from this slide, there's a quilt. I just was looking for a good way to display it on the chairs. We have probably 8, 9, 10 quilts that we use. We've been using them for quite a number of years now. Don't ask me why we didn't do it when I first started into the funeral service, but we never thought of it. So when we go anywhere to take someone into our care, we cover you with a quilt, and it makes it look warmer and nicer than the covering that is on the stretcher. We use that, and then we cover you up with the quilt. So it just is like a nice touch, and people really appreciate that. Not everybody uses one these days. It just makes it look much nicer and much warmer. So that's why that's a picture of our chapel here in New London, with, as I say, I just put the quilt there just to show you what it looks like, not for any other purpose. So
Next slide.
Sure.
So on our next slide here, I've got some options, and it's once the death does occur, these are your options on what kind of funeral or memorial service you'd like to have. And we can just go over some of them, and then feel free to ask questions about any of them or anything else that we've talked about here. And so your first option would be to have a traditional casket burial. So that's where you're not cremated. You go into a casket, the casket is buried in a cemetery somewhere. Up here in the top picture, we've got this is a picture of the New Hampshire Veteran Cemetery. So any honorably discharged veteran and their spouse is able to be buried at the cemetery, or you can have a burial of your cremated remains there. This is their in-ground, so you're actually put right in the ground. They also have what we call columbariums. They're big walls that hold cremated remains. You can be buried in one of those. Like I said, you can bury an urn, and the urn can be buried in a cemetery. The ashes, the cremated remains, you're able to scatter those places if you'd like to. You're able to bury them on your property. You're able to keep them at your house forever if you want to. You can do all sorts of things with them. And then burial at sea. We don't do that very often, but and at sea burial is an option if you'd like to have one. If you're in the military, let's say, and you served on a ship, you can be buried at sea. There's certain rules, like you have to go out a certain distance away from shore. You have to be in a certain container. If you'd like to have your ashes, your cremated remains scattered in the ocean, that's also an option. You have to go out a certain distance from the beach. I think it's 3 miles from the shoreline, and then you can be scattered in the ocean. You want to talk?
Oh,
Dan,
Yeah.
excuse me, there is a question. If you could touch on what if the person has indicated they want to do an organ or tissue donation?
So yeah, if you want to be an organ or a tissue donor, good for you. And so if you die unexpectedly, the New England Organ Bank will be notified from whatever medical facility you're at, and they will be in touch with your family. And if you are eligible for some sort of donation, your family can authorize that you be taken to their facility, or it can be done right at the funeral home, and you can give your organs or your tissue or other things like that.
yeah, you want to make sure your family knows that that's something that you want to do, because even if it says so on your license, that isn't just a given. They will get the permission from the family, the next of kin, before they do anything. And it actually takes quite a little bit of time. They don't call you immediately after the death because they don't want to act like they're swooping in. So, it could take hours before they actually call you. And then they have quite a very long and lengthy questionnaire that they go through with you about, where the person has been, have they been out of the country? Oh, lots of questions to ask. So you want to make sure that your wishes are known to your family on that. And, sometimes it just works out that it just can't be done for various reasons. So it never gets off the ground, but it's nice to let them know that that's what you want to do.
Yeah, most people end up not being eligible for any kind of organ or tissue donation because they won't take people, generally they won't take people that have been on hospice. They oftentimes won't take people that have been sick for a long time or in a hospital for a long time. To be eligible, you have to fit a pretty stringent form of criteria. And like for any kind of organ donation, you have to
Be younger.
you have to be alive in a hospital or a medical facility and have no chance of coming back for them to be able to take your organs. If you, and I'll just say while we're on that topic, if you, some people want to give their body to science or to a med school. So like up here at Dartmouth, they have a med school and they'll accept some people for body donation. And that is something you must do ahead of time if you want to, if that's an option. You have to be all pre-approved there. You can't do that after the fact. And there's all sorts of questions and forms that you and your family have to fill out for that. But and just so they take your body, we transport you to the Dartmouth Med School, or every now and then we'll take somebody to Boston or Burlington, Vermont, and they can study your body for a couple of years. And then we can go on to talk about.
I'm sorry, Dan, if I may.
Yeah.
The burial at sea.
Yeah.
Raises a question in my mind
Sure.
regarding what about spreading of ashes? Are there restrictions if you wanted to go to a lake or some body of water? I believe most lakes are public property, so to speak. So are permits necessary for that?
Yeah, that varies state by state, but in New Hampshire, you're not supposed to put ashes into any kind of body of water. So like if you go out on Lake Sunapee or whatever, you're not supposed to sprinkle somebody's ashes out there. You're not supposed to put them on a beach or within a certain distance of any kind of waterway. You know, I think probably a lot of people do sprinkle some ashes here and there in a river or on the lake, but legally you're not supposed to do that.
And can one use a green disposition here in New Hampshire?
You want me to talk about that? Sure, go ahead. Yeah, no, it's green burials, green cremation, green funerals. That's become quite a thing. And we're, I think it's kind of the next generation of what we're going to be doing for funerals and in our industry. And that having a green funeral can mean lots of different things to different people. So like a traditional burial where you're in a casket and then you have to be placed in a vault, you have to be buried in a cemetery. Most people don't think of that as very green. So there's ways to make that greener. Like we can use green or formaldehyde-free embalming fluids. So you can still have your traditional services and just not put as much chemical stuff into the ground. You can use a green casket, which we talked about doesn't have any metal, any kind of shellac or paint on it. That can be buried in the ground. Most cemeteries here in New Hampshire still require a vault of some sort. So that big concrete thing that the casket has to go in, most cemeteries still require one of those here in New Hampshire. So that most people don't find that to be very green. There are some cemeteries and more coming every day that'll allow green burial, which could be not using a vault, which could be putting the body right into the dirt. Yeah, and then some people think of cremation as greener, which it probably is, but it still requires a pretty good use of either propane or natural gas to have the cremation. And then you're left with the cremated remains, and those still have to go somewhere. And a lot of green cemeteries don't accept cremated remains because they don't think that's a very green way to do things. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the past, we have some folks who are Jewish who have been buried in our cemeteries here. And what we've done is we've used green caskets without any metal pieces, and we've wrapped the folks in shrouds, and then we lower the casket right down into the ground, and then the vault is inverted, so it's tipped upside down so it fits over the casket, so the casket can get right back to the earth as quickly as possible. That's how most of us have done it for a long time. I know the cemetery sexton in Grafton, and they have a little section in the Grafton cemetery that they're saying is green. And so I called him the other day to ask him more about it. you know, one of our problems around here is that we don't plow the cemeteries because we don't bury right now. We have to wait until May. So
Because the ground's frozen.
because the ground's frozen, there's just too much snow. It's hard to find, you know, the precise spot for a grave. So in Grafton, they're going to plow the cemetery, and then straight ahead will be a section for the green burials. And so I said to him, well, what about digging the grave? Oh yeah, they'll hand dig the grave. And I said, even in the winter with the frost and the snow, well, no, he thought they would use a backhoe. So then the question is, okay, if you're really green, that's not really green when you have to use a backhoe to dig the grave. However, you know, maybe all these things are just going to come in stages. Maybe you just want to go as green as you can, or you're partially green, or however that may work. You know, it sounds easy, but we have to work out a lot of things here in these cemeteries, because what happens if you already have a cemetery lot and want to be buried in that lot, and you want to have it green, and it's in the middle of our cemetery and we don't plow, and that's going to create an issue. So I think most of our cemeteries are going to have to go to this section of green burials. And if you want to be green and you die in the middle of winter, you're going to have to probably buy another separate lot in the green section and forget your old lot. It's just there are many items to be thought of in that regard.
Somebody just asked us a question about composting a body. So yeah, we were gonna get to that. So I'll just, the two other things are kind of along the green lines. This picture right here with the tree, that's a burial pod. So you could actually, in theory, put the body in this pod and then bury the pod and put a tree on top of it. There's a new kind of coming technology called aquamation, alkaline hydrolysis. They also call it a flameless cremation. It's where you're put in a chamber. You're put in there with some chemicals, and then you're cremated in the chemical solution. And then all that's left is the bones, which is like your cremated remains. Composting, as far as I know, is still not legal in New Hampshire. I don't think it has been made legal yet. There's only a couple states where you can actually compost a body. And I've actually seen, they've got big towers. I think it was in Washington, where the dead body's put in the top of the tower, works down the tower over months. They put in some dirt and some lye and everything to help the composting come along. And at the end, after a certain number of months, you get compost back, and you can actually spread that in your garden. So no, I don't think it's come to New Hampshire yet, but I'm sure it will be coming one of these days. And you know, it takes a little getting used to for most people, but I think it's coming. Was there another question? Oops,
Oh,
I keep swapping. And then home funerals, I'll just touch on that briefly. Used to be a very popular thing. We don't do them very often anymore, but some people still like the idea of having the body present in the home, and then you could have like a calling hour or something there. And then after you have a home funeral, you could go to a cemetery or the crematory or whatever you'd want to do after that.
We do a little bit. We've done it a few times since I've been in business. And I think maybe we'll have another couple of people that may actually end up wanting to do that. That's not, people aren't quite so big on that anymore. Of course, that was always what everybody did years ago, you know, years and years ago. You had everything in your house. So, but not so much anymore. People tend to not want to kind of be faced with that right now. We're going through a phase where I think people are just, we have a lot of people who don't want to have a viewing of any sort, don't want to see the person who has died. So home funerals are not big.
We don't do too many of them.
No.
But here in New Hampshire, I think we're close to 70% cremation rate nowadays. Nationwide, it's been getting more and more. So we do a lot less traditional burials, much more cremation. Green funerals are coming. Like here at our New London facility, we do about 90% cremation, and Newport is pretty close to that. We're in 80%. So cremation has become much more of a thing over the last 20, 30 years. And I'm sure, like we said, I'm sure the green funerals are going to continue to grow. The composting. I saw a mushroom suit the other day for the first time, where you can put the dead person into a suit and mushrooms start growing out of the suit on the decomposing body. So again, I think that takes a little bit of getting used to for most people, but I think those things are coming. So.
And just so some people aren't really aware of the fact that when you have cremation, we still have a number of folks who want to be embalmed and have their body in a casket and have calling hours or a church service with the casket present, and then have cremation after that. That's totally fine. And a fair number of people do that. And we have a rental casket, so you could use any kind of a wood casket that you wanted to, but we do also have a rental casket where there's an insert in the center of the casket is of the bed, and the person uses that, and then that comes right out. It's all used when we have the cremation, and then we put in a new insert into it. So you can do everything as you would a traditional burial with a cremation. It's just instead of going to the cemetery at the very end, we go off to the crematory, and then you can have burial of the urn, rather than, it just wouldn't happen right that same day necessarily. So, there's all sorts of options out there, and most things can be done. And sometimes it just, the timing isn't, you can't necessarily do it all lined up one right after the other sometimes, but we can do most anything. If you can think of it, we probably can do it.
Yeah, we're always trying to work with people to, fulfill their wishes in whatever way we can. So people have a lot of ideas, and we're always trying to make it happen for them. So, yeah.
Right. I guess same thing goes on another foot. Like people will want different music. They'll want instruments or bagpipes or a guitarist or something. We work very hard to find those people for you. Dan's been doing a lot of slideshows lately. We show a lot of slideshows. You come to the funeral home for either calling hours or a funeral, and they put together this slideshow. And so that when people come to see you, they can see the slideshow. That's very popular right now. It's very personal. People want a lot of personal things now. One person we had their horse out on the front lawn at the church. A service we had recently, she rescued or had lots of dogs, lots of German Shepherds. So, excuse me, lo and behold, nobody really knew it. It was at the Catholic church, and a lot of her dogs showed up. And the priest was great. He rolled with it. He let him come in at the end of the service and form an honor guard up front, all those dogs who could behave themselves at any rate. And he was really put on the spot, and he came through big time for them. And they really appreciated it, because of course that was what her life was these German Shepherds. And it was great. Yeah. So if anybody can roll with it and do something personal like that, it's something that you remember. So,
yeah. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. Let's see. Does anybody have anything they want us that we didn't talk about that they want us to go over, or?
Yeah, we've pretty much covered all of our things that we wanted to talk about. So we'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can keep talking if you want us to, or. Nobody's got any questions?
May I ask one more?
Yeah.
And how do you distinguish your role versus maybe the wrong word, compared to that of the clergy, who is doing the service.
Good one.
So we really are, all the things that go on beforehand. We guide you. There's so many unchurched people today, so many, and they don't have a clergy person and they don't know any clergy people. So we either will try to connect you with what we feel like might be the best clergy person for you or for someone who could do the service for you. And then, the clergy person will spend usually a little while with you, a couple hours maybe, thinking about what they're going to say or what they're going to do. But of course, we've done all the background work and all the organizing and everything else that goes along with it. And for me, I've been here long enough now. I know many, many families, and most of the time I know them a lot better than any clergy people, because most of our clergy people in the area now are fairly new. And I guess that's the beauty of a funeral home, is you hope that you form some sort of relationship with them. And I always remember my father knew more about some of the families than they knew about themselves, be that good or bad. But so we really are taking care of you the whole process, and we'll be with you all the way. The clergy kind of steps in and does what they're supposed to do, and tries to help you also. And if you really are feeling it, then you can continue on and perhaps go to the church of that clergy person afterwards and keep up a relationship with him or her. I didn't see the question.
Oh, I'll answer the question. I was, what happens if somebody makes pre-arrangements and or prepays and then wants to go to a different funeral home? And that happens a lot. Like if you came in and made pre-arrangements or prepaid with us, mostly it's about, people are concerned about what happens to their money if they were to prepay with a funeral home, and it is handled by a third-party company. So if you were to move, if the funeral home was to go out of business, or if you just decided you want to go to a different funeral home, you could transfer that money to a different funeral home. You could transfer the arrangements. So like people go to Florida a lot from up here. You could either stay with us and we could just handle the arrangements in Florida, or you could transfer your arrangements in it and any money to a different funeral home. That's pretty normal stuff. People do that a lot.
So it's not lost.
Yeah, your money won't. We don't get to keep your money if you change your mind.
Yeah, really. So
Dan, I have a question. So
Yeah.
for veteran services, for TAPs and that kind of thing, do you arrange that, or do you contact a veteran service, or how does that work?
Generally, we arrange that for you. We would, if we could call the veteran cemetery, we arrange for the honor guard, the TAPs, the flag folding. There's some organizations like the American Legion. We can call them if you want to have a gun salute, things like that. There's some paperwork that most of the time the family has to come up with, like an honorable discharge paper to get things moving. But then we generally make all those calls for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's done more and more now. People are they're seeing these honor guards come. They're very impressive. And most of the time they like them. We often will make pre-arrangements with veterans, and the veteran, him or herself, will not necessarily care that much for it. But it's usually the kids or the grandkids who want to have it and want to see it. And so that's one of the things I encourage people to be flexible about, is to, if the kids or the grandkids should really want to do that, allow that to happen, because, it is very touching and very moving. And seeing the picture of the veteran cemetery there, I'm a big believer in local cemeteries, but boy, that veteran cemetery, they're really spiffy down there. I think it's worth it for a drive to Bosquen to see it. It's just amazing, and how it has grown leaps and bounds since they even started. It's amazing. They do have their rules, and you have to follow the rules. They're 20 minutes you get for a service, and there are no Saturday and Sunday burials, and there are other various rules. But they really, it's quite a place. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
Neat.
Okay, do we have other questions for our panels? I don't see any. If not, then I'm going to thank, I can't see you unless, because you're still sharing your.
I'll show, oh, there we go.
Now I can see you again. I want to thank both Dan and Marion for the talk. It was very informative. And it's very obvious why you're kind of a community institution. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful service that you all are providing. And we really appreciate the fact that you were willing to talk and share it with us, particularly on the day when the baby is expected at any moment. So
Yeah, thanks for having us. And
Yeah.
no baby yet, so we're good. Thank you.
good, okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So we want to thank you very much and thank everyone who joined us, and we hope to see everybody next month. All right, thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank
See ya.
you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Wonderful. Really good presentation.
Thank
Very
you.
Thank you.